Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bill Simpson. I am a volunteer mentor with SCORE, and I wanted to cover a few introductory items before turning things over to our facilitator for today, Mark Goldberg. You see listed here on this slide the organization.
No slides.
Pardon me?
No slides.
Oh. That provide assistance to us in presenting this webinar. We are supported by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and the various chambers of commerce located throughout the Cape and the islands, as well as the Community Development Partnership located in Eastham. As always, we are grateful to all these organizations for their ongoing support of our educational programs. For those of you who are not familiar with SCORE, we are a fully volunteer nonprofit organization and a resource partner for the U.S. Small Business Administration. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. SCORE has been doing this work since its founding in 1964 through educational opportunities like this webinar, as well as by providing mentoring to people who are in business or thinking about starting a business. We benefit from having more than 50 volunteer mentors and subject matter experts serving in our chapter here on Cape Cod and the islands. People who have a broad array of differing career experiences and expertise. The same holds true for all the other chapters in our Massachusetts and Rhode Island district. And we can connect you with SCORE's volunteers throughout the country so we can match you with someone with the right experience to be of help to you. If you want to pursue this mentoring help, which is completely free and absolutely confidential, there are a couple of ways to proceed. You can go to the SCORE national website, www.score.org, and click on the Request a Mentor tab from the drop-down menu under the Find a Mentor tab. Enter your zip code and proceed. Or you can go to the website of the individual chapter listed here that covers your geographic area and click on the Find a Mentor tab. Last preliminary for today's procedures. All participants other than our facilitator have been muted. We ask that you enter any questions or comments that you might have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please do not enter them in the chat. It is just easier for us to track one feature. We will answer as many questions as we can get to during the course of the discussion. Be aware that the webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a link to the recording to all who are registered for today's session once the recording is available. And now I will turn things over to our facilitator. So Mark, take it away.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. This morning, what we're going to do is chat about networking. And networking is something that every single organization needs to think of as part of their marketing communications program. It's all about expanding your sphere of influence. Somebody many years ago told me that when you think about mentoring, it's all about being interested in other people and having something interesting to say. So when you think about going to a mentoring event, whether it be a Chamber of Commerce meeting or a district meeting of some sort or an association meeting, the thing you have to think about is that the focus is on other people, but you have to prepare. So this morning, what we're going to talk about is how to think about networking, how to prepare to network, then how to network so that you can get the most out of the experience. When you think about networking, when you think about the word networking, what comes to mind? Put it in the chat. Give me some words that you think are appropriate when you hear the word networking. Now, I can tell you that when I was very young and starting out in business, networking to me equaled fear. Meeting people I didn't know and then having to talk to them. So we've got connection, collaboration. Sure, you're collaborating the whole time. You're learning. And that's one of the nice things about networking. It identifies opportunities, and it is definitely marketing. It is part of the marketing communications that each one of us has. So I see very positive statements, which is good because you're looking at it as a positive activity that we are going to get involved in. So what I want you to do is think about this as we go forward. Now, in order for networking to be a success, it's all about meeting people, making connections, and creating networks of people, or as you will talk about later, communities. It's all about information exchange. You have knowledge, they have knowledge, they have connections, you have connections. It's all about the exchange of information in the form of a dialogue. It's not a pitch. We'll talk about that too. But it's all about exchanging what you have for what they have. And it's all about listening. Listening is the number one skill that you have to bring to a networking event. As Stephen Covey said in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, we listen first to understand and then reply. But most of us get caught up in listening after we reply, and we listen with the intent to just reply. So networking is all about listening. And if you spend the majority of your time listening, you're going to learn, you're going to understand the people you're talking to better, and you're going to be able to take action afterwards. It's all about building your brand so that people know who you are, what you stand for, what your brand values are in the course of communicating with them. Networking success also has to do with follow-up. Many people go to networking events, they come out with a handful of cards and say, success. But quite frankly, nothing happens until you follow up. That 24 hours after the networking event closes and you have a couple of cards of people that were interested in you and you interested in them, and you follow up, that makes networking success. And it's staying on people's radar. One of the things we've learned over a period of time is that people's radar is not necessarily tuned to you and you to them. But if you network effectively, if you follow up effectively, if you communicate effectively with them, then you're going to stay on their radar and become more connected. Now, when we think about networking, it is one of the proactive marketing tools we have available to us today. And I can say that on a daily basis, I talk to clients and we talk about marketing, and the very first thing they talk about is social media. This is not social media. This is an integrated marketing communications tool that is part of your plan, that is face-to-face. And one of the things that we have to be aware of is that there are only a few ways that we can get face-to-face with other people. Sales calls, networking events, trade shows. Most everything else is indirect. So when we think in terms of this marketing communication tool, its heart is developing relationships. It's connecting with other people, and it's connecting with them so you can enhance your sphere of knowledge, of understanding, of connectivity, so that you can move forward with your strategic objectives. It's also important because it leverages what you do, how you do it with other people who have needs, wants, and desires that can connect with you to improve your effectiveness. And every single networker, like every single successful entrepreneur, has a plan. And you have a plan to network. I will give you an example. My wife and I owned a trade show marketing company for almost 30 years. Our specialty was training staff how to work trade shows and then measuring their results. We had a very lucrative contract with a pharmaceutical company that sold over-the-counter products. They were sold to the largest US pharmaceutical company. The people at the new company said, "We don't believe in what you do, get lost." So we went out, found a new client. 2 years later, that client was bought up by the same company. So we decided that we had to have a different plan. And our plan all revolved around networking at our national event. So we found out who the key player was in the new owner, and we networked with him casually. And then we sat next to him at a webinar, a workshop. And then we networked again with him after it's over and showed him a sample of some of the measurement work we did for the company they just acquired. Our networking landed us an invitation to come to New York to meet with them, which subsequently became our largest pharmaceutical client. And it was networking. It was networking at the events at the show. It was networking before and after the workshops. It was networking in the hallways so that we could execute our plan. One of the things we want to think about, it's all about building quality relationships. It's not a pitch. It's getting to know somebody else, understanding something about them. So if you think in terms of going to an event and having something interesting to say, think about the last great book you read. Think about the last super movie you saw. Think about the last vacation you took. Think about your family. Think about what is you can say that will be interesting to other people, and they will have a connection with you. And let the business follow, because what you're trying to do is build those quality relationships. One of the things you want to think about is not collecting, it's connecting. So if you see 2 or 3 people standing talking, it's okay to saddle up and listen and eventually join the discussion, because it's a process. It's a process of them getting to know you and you getting to know them, not pitching your product, talking about yourself, because that gets old. So the focus has to be on them, and then they transfer it back to you. So one of the things you want to think about is networking events are time limiting. They're normally a couple hours long. So what you need to think in terms is of maximizing the time you have to achieve your objectives. If you only had an objective to meet one specific person that you knew because you researched who was attending this event, it's okay if you walked away with one card that you can act on, rather than moving from person to person to person to collect as many cards as you can. Now, as we said, this is all about community building. And it's all about finding people that have connectivity to you. It's not necessarily looking for the chief honcho at this event, because they may not be the person you're really looking for to accomplish your tasks. And you do that by valuing the connections with the person. And that person may be an influencer in the process of you getting to your ultimate goal. Maybe is not the financial decision maker. And sometimes it's more important to create a relationship with the influencers in an environment than it is to attempt to get a connection with somebody that doesn't have the time to get to know you. We also want to think about, it's got to be mutually beneficial for both parties in the dialogue to continue it. And you know very quickly if the other person is not getting what they think they need. They will take a half step backward, a nonverbal communication of disconnecting. When it is totally self-serving and you are pitching yourself, your services, your organization, you will find that the physical connection with the person diminishes very quickly just by watching them. They'll start looking around the room. They'll try to see who else is there. They'll back away from you. They'll fold their arms. in a defensive position. The other thing you want to think about in order to build community is be as open as possible to other people. And then get those people to connect you with other people that they know. Because all of us know, our mothers told us, don't talk to strangers before we went to school or on the way to school. So almost everybody in these events are somewhat of a stranger because you don't either get to see them but on an annual basis at a trade show, or you don't know them at all. So you need to be open to connecting with people who can then connect you with other folks. Now, one of the most important things you want to think about is the impression that you leave in building a community. And that is becoming person to person through authenticity. And authenticity is connecting with them on an individual basis. I meet Bill at an event, and Bill's tanned. And I say, "Gee, Bill, looks like you've just been on vacation." And Bill says, "Yeah, I just got back from Hawaii." And you say, "Well, tell me something about Hawaii. I've only been there once, but it was just for a quick visit." And stand back and listen. And use nonverbal communications to show you're taking it in. You nod your head. You use, interesting. Tell me more. What that says to them is you are authentic in your connection. And then it will be your turn because they see you as somebody they want to continue a conversation with. Now, the other thing you have to think about in networking is it's not short term. You don't get a card and you get business. If you make a connection with somebody, that's when it all begins. They feel comfortable with you, you feel comfortable with them, and then you start building a relationship. And the relationship takes a long time because there's trust involved, and trust doesn't come overnight. So look at the activity of networking to be a long-term investment. And the networking continues after the networking event. And you might bring somebody else into a conversation. With virtual communications today, we can do that instantly. We can say, "Hey, Bill, I met somebody the other day that had the same exact interest that you did. And I think it'd be good for you to meet with them. So create a Zoom meeting, the three of you meet." That expands the sphere of influence for both of you. So think in terms of building community, just not connecting. Now, why do they fail? We always, when we talk about small businesses in small business building kinds of events, we often ask ourselves, why do small businesses fail? And number one reason is they run out of cash. So we talk about that. Well, it's important to understand why networking does fail. It fails, number one, because people talk too much. You got to pace yourself. You got to understand, watching the person you're talking to, whether they're taking in what you're saying, whether they're accepting what you're saying, whether they're engaged with what you say. If they take a half step forward while you're talking, they have just told you that you are on track. And likewise, if you talk too much about yourself, and you must know how you feel listening to somebody in a networking event who does nothing but talk about themselves. So you want to think in terms of pacing and also making sure that you are using the right amount of time for your communications. You also want to make sure that you're not using jargon they might understand, because that turns them off immediately and the networking will fail. I remember I went to a national conference with a client and they used an abbreviation throughout the entire presentation. And I finally leaned over to the person next to me and asked me what it meant. And he said, "Well, let me look it up. I'm not sure either." So you have to make sure that the person is understanding what you're talking about. And it's easy for us to slip into jargon, especially if we're in an environment that is very fast paced. They fail when we speak in generalities. Overflowing generalities are words that people just gloss over and they tune out. So think in talking specifics. And the last one that I've noticed that's failed, that causes failure, is when we try and one-up one another. Men do this more than women do this. Bill says to me, I just went to Hawaii. And I say, gee, it sounds great, but I went to the Galapagos Islands and they were great. Rather than trying to get Bill to continue his communication to tell me why he enjoyed going to Hawaii and what it is that will draw him to come back. And where should I go if I'm particularly interested in surfing, for example, or touring, for example, or seeing a volcano? So what you need to do is think in terms of holding back, because it's easy to do that because you want to tell your side of the story as well. So consider these elements when you consider your next networking event. Well, along with failure is the myths that go along with networking. It's not about quantity. It's not about walking out and exiting a networking event with a pocket full of cards. It's about a few cards that are very focused on your objectives for going there with notes on them so that you can follow up. And notes are very important. Somebody once told me the average adult can only keep 7 new items of information in their brain before something pops out. So if I'm talking to one of you and you're telling me all about the product you are producing that has differentiators that I might be interested in applying to our product line, I need to take some notes, because before the evening is over or afternoon is over or the networking event is over, I may have talked to half a dozen people and I won't remember the details I need when I pick up the phone and call you and say, I'm calling to follow up on our conversation at the XYZ networking event, and then state what your follow-up was. It's not about meeting the big shots. It's connecting with decision makers and influencers, because you can take the time with them and they will take the time to understand the story. And it's not about a pitch. We're not going to say to you, create an elevator pitch that you can use when somebody says, well, tell me about your business. You need to give them enough so they understand what it is you do. Marketech 360 improves performance through training and measurement. How about you telling me something about what you do? So keep the focus back on them. But you want to remember that letting them know what you do and how you do it and what your differentiators are and what your competitive advantages are all very important, but it's connecting on a personal level so they want to talk to you and they find you comfortable to talk with. But the other thing I want you to think about is that networking doesn't just happen at a networking event. How many of you have ever been in line at the supermarket and somebody had a sweatshirt on that was really cool and you want to know what it meant? And they told you what it meant. And all of a sudden you're having a little conversation between the two of you while the checker is checking you out. That's networking. You get on an elevator and you see somebody wearing a great tie, if people still wear ties, and you have a conversation. And your conversation may be, I used to buy United Nations ties that were children's ties. And they focus on images of children. Get a conversation going. They happen every place. So don't save your networking just for specific places, specific times, and specific events, because they happen all the time. So what makes a great networker? Well, you see, very first at the top is not being a good talker. It's having a follow-up plan and referring the people you talk to other people. I can tell you, I've been mentoring now for almost 13 years. And I think the number one benefit that I give clients, other than somebody to talk to about their plans and their wishes, is giving them contacts so that they can get to the next level. Well, that's the way networkers are also. You need to follow up very quickly so that they don't, number one, forget the conversation, but two, give them value in the conversation to the next level. So as you think about the conversation after you leave, make some notes to yourself on where else can you take this conversation. Networkers enter the whole process with a positive attitude. You know, I knew a guy in Oklahoma who was a true entrepreneur. He used to get up every morning, he'd look in the mirror and say, okay, buddy, how are we going to make money today? Because he had a number of sources of revenue. You have to have a very positive attitude about entering in the network, into the networking process. You look in the mirror and you smile and you see what you look like smiling. So you can smile at other people, because smiling is the number one way that you show that you are open, warm, and welcoming. You have to enter it enthusiastically and motivated. I'm going to meet 5 new people in the next 2 hours. I am going to introduce myself to some people I don't know, or I'm going to find somebody to help introduce me. And that's a great tool. I know Bill when I get to the networking event and I'm saying, Bill, I really don't know anybody here. Can you introduce me to somebody that you know? And then Bill introduces me. He goes off, and then I will ask them if you could introduce me to somebody else. Master networkers are trustworthy. They don't tell big stories. They don't use overflowing mentoring kind of comments. They're trustworthy. The words they say can be believed. And they're good listeners. Stephen Covey says that most people listen with the intent to reply, not to understand. So the whole time somebody is talking to you in a networking environment, you're thinking about how to answer them rather than waiting until they are done and then reply, because you don't know exactly where they're going unless you wait to the end. You're a good listener, and you listen with your whole body. And that means you watch them and you then react. If they take a half step forward to tell you something, they're saying they're very interested in it. And if you are interested, you take that half step forward. You watch their eyes. If their eyes go up and over your shoulder while you're talking, you change gears, try something else, because they're not interested in that. And then be very succinct and very focused in your reply. And don't be afraid as a listener to ask if you can take notes. Now, one of the things that master networkers do is they're always networking. And you know people like that. My grandfather was in the automobile business for 47 years. He sold cars from the time I think he could drive. He was always networking. He owned an Esso gas station on Long Island, across the street from his automobile dealership. And his staff were always networking with people as to, hey, your car looks like it could be ready to be replaced. Why don't you go see Charlie across the street? Connecting. And they're thankful. Somebody spends 5 minutes with you at a networking event. You need to make sure you appreciate, and you show them you appreciate the time you spent, and leave it so that they know you want to connect with them again. If that's your result. And also be helpful. It is always good in the course of a conversation if you can say, you know, I know somebody that could help you. If you could give me your card, I'll be glad to send you his name and contact information. Now, just like being helpful and thankful, being sincere and authentic is important. People need to see that you are real. And when you're real and you're a good listener and you're trustworthy, then networking becomes a very positive marketing communication tool for you. So what makes it work? Number one, be ready when you arrive. So how do you get ready? Well, you might pull up in your car in the parking lot and relax and smile and think about what your objective is in attending the meeting. And it's not to talk to people you know the whole time. One of the big disadvantages I find in going to networking events locally is that people are only talking to people they know, and getting into the conversation is very difficult. So what makes it work is finding somebody you know to help start the conversation with you. You also want to think about finding the points of common interest. If common interests are books and they're mystery books, then focus on that. If it's seeing all the Academy Award nominated movies, then focus on that. If you've only seen one, focus on that one. The other thing you want to think about, and this is yes.
We have a question.
Sure.
This is from Jessa Lynn. The question is, I often get asked first about what I do. What's a good way to turn the interest back on them without ignoring their question or going too much into myself and losing them?
Okay. Think about how you could communicate what you do in one sentence. And if you said, I run the University of Connecticut bookstore system, can you tell me what you do? Or how about if you share with me what you do? See where there's some common interests. Oh, I run a bookstore in Orleans. So you want to make it very short, very quick, but immediately ask them. You turn the focus back on them. Does that help?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other thing you want to all think about is when you're in conversation with somebody, make your answers to their probes textured and with flavor. And that means yes or no doesn't work. You got to make it textured and flavor so it's interesting. Remember, be interested in other people and have something interesting to say. Because if you just answer with yes or no, that requires them to ask another question. So give them some hints on where you want the conversation to go by texturing and flavoring your conversation. And as we said, be aware of nonverbal communications. 55 to 60% of everything that you say, everything you do, every communication you make is nonverbal. From your eyes to your stance to your arms to the pace of the conversation. It's nonverbal. So be aware of nonverbal communications. Their eyes, do they go over your shoulder? They bore a hole straight through your head? Are they holding their arms across their chest in a defensive manner? Are their hands in their pockets? Are they standing 18 inches away from you, or are they 3 feet away from you? Now, you also want to think about what happens afterwards, because that's what makes it work. So you want to find out how they want to communicate afterwards. How about we set up a Zoom meeting? Let's Wednesday or Thursday in the morning. Or how about if I gave you a call next Thursday afternoon, or would Friday work better? Get them to commit if you would like to follow up as to what works better and when, not if. Now, you always have business cards of some sort. Now, it depends on what you want them to do. If you want them to go to your website to learn more about you, you emphasize on the card you have for networking events, your website. So the card you hold in your hand that you hand to them has the website on one side and your contact information on the other. If in fact you want them to call you, you have your name and your telephone number on one side and your website and email address on the other side. So you orchestrate how you want the communications to take place. A rule of thumb is you wait to be asked for the card, not just giving cards out and collecting cards. Now, for any of you who have ever worked overseas, you know that, especially in the Orient, people who are networking and have business cards treat them totally differently than we do. You hand me your card, I put it in my pocket. Or I open my business card holder and I put it in my business card, put it back in my pocket. If somebody from an Oriental country hands you their business card, they expect you to read it. If you're sitting at a table with somebody, a hi-hat table, having a cocktail and networking, they expect you to put the card on the table in front of you and refer to it. It is a tool. It's a tool for memorability. It's a tool for connectivity. It's a it's a tool for understanding. Now, one of the things that we all have periodically is fear of rejection. We go into a networking event, we see a couple of people talking, we walk up to them and they keep talking and we never get involved in the conversation. I did training of adults for over 30 years. And I can tell you that speaking in front of a new group, training them, there was always that fear of rejection, that they wouldn't warm up to what I was going to say in the first 2 minutes. I would always use self-talk. I would write the introduction I was going to use for that particular group, because we customized everything that we did. And I put the introduction in my pocket. And I would go into someplace quiet in the corner of a room and I would self-talk. You could do it in your car before you go into the event. And practice what you're going to say if fear of rejection is one of those elements. But a little practice doesn't hurt. Before you leave, you could look in a mirror, go in the men's room or ladies' room and make sure nobody else is there, and look in the mirror and say, "Hi, my name's Mark Goldberg and I'm with the XYZ company." And always wear a name tag. Now, you go to a networking event, they ask you to write your name on a tag. I don't know about you, but sometimes my handwriting isn't that great. So I always have a prepared name tag that I wear. And you wear it on the right-hand side, so when you shake hands with them or do a fist bump, they can see your name. If you wear it on the left-hand side, it goes out into space, they can't see it. But if they don't have to struggle for your name, that's one thing more that will make it an effective event.
I have another question, Mark.
Good, because I'm stuck.
This is what is the best way to initiate conversation for introverts?
I think the best way for an introvert is talk about things you're comfortable with. If you love to read, then talk about books. I love to talk about the last book I read. And I'm always shocked at how many people have read it or it's on their list. And that's a way to get it started. It's non-threatening. Talk about American fiction. How'd you like that? It was really a sleeper movie to begin with. Talk about something that's comfortable for you. Now, the flip side works for the introvert you're talking to also. So make it comfortable for both you and them and talk about topics that are of interest to you. Does that help?
I have another question.
Yep.
What if you have a challenging name that people often stumble on?
A challenging game.
Name.
Oh, name. Okay. I can tell you one. My name is Mark, M-A-R-C. And I can't tell you the number of people in my career call me Mars. Don't be afraid just to correct them. We have a friend, Yitka Borowick, and people call her Jitka. So just say, nice to meet you, but my name is. Now, a lot of people have very complicated names, use nicknames. If that works for you, like one of my grandson's name is a Shepherd. And some people have a problem with that. So he says, just call me Shep. Does that work? Okay.
One last question.
Sure.
Oh, wait a minute. I gotta get it. Oh, said thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's see, where were we? Oh, we're on the next one. Okay. So get ready to network. Have a quiet time, have a quiet lunch. Just prepare for yourself. Volunteer at the event. One of the nice ways to do it is if you volunteer to help set up, if you help, then you're already involved, you're already engaged. And for introverts, that's a great way because you're talking to people while you're setting up the chairs, while you're setting up the tables, while you're doing whatever it takes to get it going. You're talking to people already. And when it starts, you're involved in the process. Also, sometimes going with somebody helps. But you want to think about clarifying what your goals are in attending. When you think about going, what it is that you want to achieve in the event itself. Write it on a piece of paper, put it in your pocket, periodically look at it to remind yourself, okay, I'm here to meet new people in the real estate industry because my new business has one of them as a targeted customer. I want to meet as many people in the real estate industry in our town as possible. Arrive early. Now, if you get there and you volunteer, you're there early. But if you're not going to volunteer, get there early and see whose names are on the table in the name tags. So you get an idea of who's going to be there. Maybe there's some people you know there already, and you look for them. One thing you might think about is when you walk in and you go to the table and you get your name tag and look around, see who's there, see where the openings are. You also might want to find somebody, and if they're really smart in their networking, they have a host at the door and use them to get them to introduce you to somebody to get started. And as I said before, a sentence about yourself, because they're definitely going to ask if they don't know what it is, what you do.
I have a question.
Yep.
How to get the most of a room full of amazing people and not get stuck talking to only one person?
Well, you want to think in terms of what is your objective and when it is you want to break it off. And the way you break it off is, I would really like to continue this conversation, but I made arrangements to meet so-and-so across the room at about this time. So what you want to do is use it's a strategy called the missing person theory. It's not you that wants to break it away. You made a promise to meet somebody, and it's that time. That's one way to do it. And there's the other way is it may be just great for you to have that one conversation. And if it takes you where you want it to go, let it go. If you're trying to meet more than one person with a specific target, then you need to figure out how to break it off. Does that work? Okay. All right. Another thing you might want to think about is use an accountability partner. And this one really works. You go to an event and the person sits next to you is not going, but you share with that person what your objective is in going to the event. And then you two sit down afterwards or the next morning and say, okay, tell me how it went. What worked, what didn't work. Or that partner you go with, the person you go with, they could be your accountability partner and you be theirs. You watch each other. You see how it goes. You see how the conversations go. You see how you handled yourself, how the communications went, and then provide feedback to one another. So the next event you go to, you do it even better. Now, you also want to think about what questions do you want answered? So ask questions of them that you want to get answered. You know, your product sounds really interesting. What's your key differentiator? Or what's new in your business world? Mine's kind of static right now. Or you've been at this a long time. What do you like most about what you do? Get them to talk about themselves. And, you know, I'm here because I'm trying to learn more about marketing than this new product that I have. What generates the most business for you? Get them to talk to you about their experience, their knowledge. Share with you. And you come back to them. And it may be, you know, I've tried that, but it didn't quite work. Here was the problem I had. So think about what questions are you trying to get answered? Now, we talked a little bit about business cards. They are your pocket billboard. But make sure that you're just not walking around handing it out. Use them for the intended purpose, and that is a way to communicate with them after the event so they remember you. As we talked about, have a separate business card for networking if in fact you want them to go to your website, or if in fact you want them to know what your product looks like, or you want them to know what is your offer, not the product, but what need, want, or desire are you fulfilling? What hook do you have that will hook them in? So think in terms of using that pocket billboard to your advantage. Now, I went to an event that the SBA put on last year, and it was very interesting. The presenter showed us a map of a room. And what do you do in a room in order to work it most beneficially? Well, the first thing she talked about was doing research, and we talked about that a little bit. If it's a Chamber of Commerce event, contact the Chamber of Commerce executive director and find out who has attended in the past. So you have a feel who's going to be there. Travel light. Hang your coat up someplace, carry a briefcase that is a portfolio, not a buckled briefcase. Have a place for your card so that you can have an easy place to access it. Look confident. Walk from person to person. You might want to start at the food table. Why? Because everybody goes to the food table and it's easy to talk to people. Wow, those canapes look really good. Or I wonder what this is. Try and circulate a room. See who's attending before you decide where you're going to spend your time. If you're an introvert, look for other introverts. It might be easier to start a conversation with them. Make sure that you are the first to extend your hand. That's welcoming. It might be a fist bump today, but it might be a handshake. And the key to an effective handshake is delivering the same amount of pressure that you receive, so it's not bone crushing. as we've talked about throughout this entire session, ask first, then tell. Get them talking to you and get them to introduce other people. Remember, it's give and take. But as you go through, decide what your follow-up conversation is going to be. Even if you have to walk off to the side and make some notes to yourself, that's the thing to do so you don't forget. One of the things we used to teach in exhibitor staff training is that it's okay after you have disengaged with somebody to spend a moment or two by yourself before you engage somebody else, to write some notes to yourself so you remember. But understanding how to work a room is really good, and it's interesting as well. Now, many of us are networking virtually today. We go to a virtual meeting and we don't know everybody. And if the organizer is smart enough, they'll give time for people to meet one another. So the very first thing you want to do is you want to take the 3 dots at the top right of the picture and put your name and your organization on it so people don't have to guess. And present yourself. Dress well, at least from the waist up. And use a contrasting background. So if you have to create a background, make sure it's contrasting with what you're wearing so it doesn't blend in. Position your camera so that it's eye level, so it looks natural to the other people. If you're at home, make sure you have a meeting in progress and watch your posture. Having a clutter-free background is very important. And make sure the lighting is good. In this room, I have a light to the left of the display, but I also have an indirect light behind me over my shoulder, so I have balanced light. So these are things you have to think about as you go forward. You want to think about a positive impression. Same thing if you are face-to-face. I was on a session a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we'll go around and everybody introduce themselves and tell us how long you've been in SCORE and where you're from. So think about how you'd introduce yourself and what do you want to say about yourself. Be brief, be clear, be focused. And you might find a way to communicate with other people that you're talking to in this networking environment so that they will want to talk to you. I can't tell you the number of times when I go to these events where you're meeting people you don't know and they say something about themselves. I write their name down so I can email them afterwards to say, hey, could you send me a copy of that work that you're doing on women's events? When you are networking either physically, face-to-face, or virtually, remember, if you promise something, do it, because they'll remember you didn't do it. But long after, they forget who you are if you did do it. So think about virtually networking, much the same we do visually, but we have to take another step because you have to figure out how to get back to them, whether it should be telephone call, whether it's be another virtual communications, so that you can continue the conversation. Somebody asked me a little while ago about a networking statement. Very short, very focused. Make it a sentence, make it a couple of words. I used to say, we improve performance through training and measurement, tells what we do and how we do it. And then I turn the table back to them. So figure out how you're going to do that. So let's think about networking. We want to approach every encounter with an open mind. We want to pay attention when somebody says or does something that connects with you, that will help you build on the connection. When we think about it, pick 2 or 3 people that you feel comfortable with them from the outset so that you can proceed to build the connection. Have a goal. Like anything else, have a plan. going forward with your goals. If you go to a networking event on Monday night, by Wednesday, you will have contacted the people that you have identified that you want to continue the conversations with. And you will have in the mail or delivered to them what you promised by Friday. And then do reality checks. You know, we're not always on the people's radar once we met them. So go back and follow up again. And if the conversation is positive, if the feeling of mutuality is positive, keep going. So set an objective, smile and engage. Prepare that opening line to get it going. Know what you want to learn when you go to an event. Think about that handshake. It tells a lot about you. And even your fist bump. I always carry a 3x5 card in my pocket so that I can take notes. Because many times you can't just write them on the back of a card because people now print on both sides. Always bring 2 pens. This morning when I sat down for a mentoring session, I started writing notes and the ink ran out. So I reached over and got another pen. Have 2. We talked about following up 2 days afterwards and then following up 2 days after that. Have a timely manner in your follow-up. Even if there's no potential for connection, it's okay to send them an email and say, hey, it was really great talking to you. Good luck. And networking is not just talking. It's your whole body. And you can tell a whole lot about people just by watching them and how they interact. So remember, it's meeting other people and being interested in other people. Okay, Bill, any other questions?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm terrible with names and forget them as soon as someone tells me. Any advice on how to tackle this?
Yes. The thing that I do, and I learned this, is always repeat their name back to them. Bill, it was nice meeting you. It's nice meeting you. Tell me something about what you did before you retired. The other thing is, if you don't think it'll remember, use that 3x5 card and write it down and say, would you mind if I take some notes while we talk? Write their name down.
Another question. I used to love networking events in person, met lots of people, got lots of cards, but now virtually it's almost impossible. Haven't had any luck. People just don't get back.
I think that's universal. Unfortunately, I think the entire mode of communicating has changed since the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. We used to have a monthly meeting. We had 20 to 24 people show up at 8 o'clock in the morning from all over the Cape. Today, if we have 8 to 10 come in person, it's the mode. What you have to do is learn that sometimes you need to take the initiative to keep it going. If you don't want it to keep going, then you have to be satisfied with whatever you get. I find that if you use a number of modalities, whether it be send them a note, call them on the phone, send them an email, text them, use a variety of modalities, then you might get their attention again and get the conversation going again. I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, I think we're out of time.
Well, there's one here I see. Do you have any tips for hosting an event? Let me capture that one before we go.
Okay.
The thing I would suggest is remember what the objective of the event is and set the event up so that it's capable of achieving that event. If you want people to communicate in small groups and have hi-hat tables, if you want to have people engaging with one another, have 1 or 2 volunteers who are at the door to welcome people and then transition them to other people. Those are two.
We had one more question.
Yep.
Is it possible to get a copy of Mark's presentation? And that it gives me an opportunity to remind everybody that we'll be sending you a link to a recording of this program.
And I have no problem sharing the PowerPoint. I'll send
Okay.
it on to Jim, and he can attach it. Okay. Is
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
there a survey?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Bill. See you later.
Okay.
I'll be there.